There is a profound truth that we often overlook in our pursuit of a flawless life. To be human is to be messy. We are by nature imperfect beings stitched together with a mosaic of experiences, some bright and beautiful, others fractured and raw. Embracing this messiness is not a sign of weakness, but a courageous act of self-acceptance. When we allow ourselves to acknowledge the broken parts within us, we begin to see that they do not diminish our worth. Instead, they reveal the depth and complexity of who we are. It is in these cracks that the light finds its way in, illuminating the path to growth and authenticity. So often, we are taught to hide our brokenness, to wear masks that conceal the scars and the struggles that make us human. Society praises strength and independence, urging us to present a curated version of ourselves that is polished and complete. But the truth is, none of us are untouched by pain or failure. We all have moments when life shatters our plans, when the weight of disappointment feels too heavy to bear. In these moments, embracing our messiness means giving ourselves permission to grieve, to be honest about our pain without rushing to fix it. It means allowing ourselves to feel deeply, even when those feelings are uncomfortable or inconvenient. When we accept that brokenness is a part of our shared human experience, we also begin to see each other with new eyes. No longer do we have to pretend that everything is fine when it isn't. We can meet one another in the honest places, in the cracks and shadows, with empathy and understanding. This kind of connection, born out of authenticity, is what binds us together. It allows us to say, "Me too, I've been there." And in that moment of shared humanity, shame loses its power. We realize that we are not alone in our struggles, that brokenness does not isolate us, but instead becomes the bridge that brings us closer. Embracing the messiness of being human also challenges the lie that perfection is the goal. Perfectionism whispers that if we can just get everything right, we will be worthy of love and belonging. But the truth is that love is found not in our perfection, but in our willingness to show up as we are, unfinished, flawed, and vulnerable. The beauty of our humanity lies in the courage to embrace all of it, the joy and the sorrow, the victories and the defeats. It is in telling our whole story, not just the highlights, that we find true freedom. Furthermore, accepting our brokenness teaches us grace. When we can hold space for our own imperfections, we become more compassionate toward the imperfections of others. We stop demanding that people around us fit into neat boxes of who we think they should be. Instead, we learn to offer the gift of understanding, to listen without judgment, and to love without conditions. Grace reminds us that brokenness is not something to be ashamed of, but a reminder of our need for connection, for community, for one another. Beloved, to embrace the messiness of being human is to embrace life itself. It is to stand boldly in the truth that our brokenness does not define us, it refines us. It teaches us resilience, deepens our empathy, and strengthens our faith. When we stop striving for perfection and start embracing our humanity, we discover that even in our broken places, we are whole. And that, beloved, is where true beauty lies. There is a quiet strength and vulnerability that we often underestimate. In a world that equates power with invincibility, it takes immense courage to open up about our pain. To be vulnerable is to risk being seen, truly seen, for who we are, without the masks or armor we so carefully construct. It is choosing to share the parts of ourselves that are still healing, the wounds that haven't yet scarred over. Yet, this act of courage is precisely what deepens our connections with others and paves the way for genuine healing. When we dare to let others into our most tender places, we discover that vulnerability is not a weakness to hide, but a bridge that leads to understanding and love. The truth is, beloved, we all carry pain. Whether it is the ache of loss, the sting of rejection, or the weight of unmet expectations, pain is a part of our shared human experience. But so often we hide it. We fear that if others saw our brokenness, they might turn away. In doing so, we build walls that isolate us, walls that keep us from the very connection our hearts crave. Vulnerability tears down these walls. It invites others into the sacred spaces of our hearts and says, "This is me. This is what hurts." And in that raw honesty, we find the courage to be known. For it is only when we are truly known that we can be truly loved. Opening up about our pain not only creates deeper connections with others, but also brings profound healing. When we speak our truth, shame loses its power. Shame thrives in secrecy, convincing us that our struggles make us unworthy. But when we bring our pain into the light, we expose the lie. We discover that we are not alone, that others have walked similar paths, and that there is no pain too great to be shared. This shared humanity becomes a balm for our wounds, reminding us that we do not have to carry our burdens alone. Moreover, vulnerability has a ripple effect. When we choose to be open about our pain, we give others permission to do the same. Our courage becomes contagious, encouraging those around us to lower their guard and share their own stories. This kind of authenticity builds trust and fosters a sense of belonging. It creates communities where it is safe to be real, where people can come as they are. No pretense, no perfection required. In such spaces, healing flows freely because the weight of carrying our pain alone is lifted by the arms of others who are willing to share it. But let us not confuse vulnerability with oversharing. To be vulnerable is not to broadcast our pain to anyone who will listen, but to choose wisely the hearts we trust with our story. It is discerning who has earned the right to hear our truth and sharing it with intention and care. Vulnerability requires boundaries. It requires us to protect the sacredness of our story, even as we share it. When done with wisdom, it becomes a source of strength rather than a plea for validation. It reminds us that our story, no matter how broken, holds value and deserves to be told. Beloved, the power of vulnerability is that it leads us home, to ourselves and to each other. When we choose to open up about our pain, we create space for grace, for empathy, and for connection. We learn that our brokenness is not a barrier to love, but a pathway to it. It is through vulnerability that we find the courage to heal, to forgive, and to move forward. So let us not shy away from the risk of being seen. For it is in being seen that we discover we are already enough, loved, worthy, and whole, even in our most broken places. There is a profound shift that happens when we choose to reframe the narrative of our brokenness. Often, when life shatters our plans and leaves us picking up the pieces, it's easy to see ourselves as victims of our circumstances, defined by what happened to us or what was lost. But what if instead we viewed our brokenness as an invitation to grow, an opportunity for transformation? Reframing the narrative does not deny the pain or minimize the heartbreak. Rather, it challenges us to see the possibility that lies within our wounds. It asks us to believe that even in the darkest chapters of our story, something beautiful can emerge. This shift in perspective requires courage. It's far easier to dwell in the familiar patterns of resentment and regret than to search for meaning in the midst of our suffering. But beloved, pain can be a powerful teacher if we allow it. Our brokenness has the potential to deepen our empathy, broaden our understanding, and strengthen our resilience. When we stop asking, "Why did this happen to me?" and start asking, "What can this teach me?" we reclaim our power. We move from being passive recipients of our pain to active participants in our healing. This doesn't make the pain disappear, but it transforms its purpose. Reframing the narrative also invites us to redefine what it means to be whole. Wholeness is not the absence of brokenness, but the willingness to integrate all parts of our story, the victories and the defeats, the joy and the sorrow. It is embracing the cracks and scars as evidence of survival, as reminders that we are capable of rising even after the hardest falls. Just as a mosaic is made beautiful not by perfect tiles, but by the way the shattered pieces are brought together, Our lives become masterpieces when we allow our broken parts to contribute to the bigger picture. One powerful way to reframe our narrative is to focus on the lessons we've learned and the strengths we've gained through hardship. Perhaps the betrayal taught us to set healthier boundaries, or the loss taught us to cherish what remains. When we start viewing our struggles as a form of training ground, preparing us for a future we cannot yet see, the weight of our pain becomes more bearable. Every scar becomes a story of survival, a testament to the battles we've fought and the courage it took to keep moving forward. This perspective transforms our pain into purpose, giving meaning to the moments that once seemed meaningless. But let us also acknowledge that reframing the narrative is not about toxic positivity or ignoring the reality of our suffering. It's about choosing to see the and instead of the or. We can be both broken and growing, grieving and healing, afraid and brave. This kind of radical acceptance frees us from the pressure to rush our healing or pretend we're okay when we're not. It allows us to honor the pain while also honoring the possibility that something good can come from it. In this space of both/and, we find the grace to keep going, to keep believing that the story isn't over yet. Beloved, when we reframe the narrative, we become the authors of our own story. We stop waiting for circumstances to change before we find peace. Instead, we choose to create meaning from the chapters that broke us. This choice is an act of defiance against despair. It is a declaration that no matter what happens, our story can still be redeemed. So let us hold fast to this truth. Brokenness is not the end of the story. It is a turning point, an opportunity for growth and transformation. When we embrace this perspective, we discover that even in our most fractured moments, there is a strength rising within us, a strength that has been there all along. There is a sacred kind of courage that awakens in us when we find ourselves at rock bottom, the courage to rise again, even when everything in us feels broken. To rise is an act of defiance against the darkness that threatens to consume us. It is choosing to believe in the possibility of a new day, even when the night seems endless. This kind of courage does not come from a place of unshakable strength, but from the very depths of our weakness. It is born in those moments when we have nothing left to give, when the weight of disappointment, failure, or loss has left us on our knees. It is here in the ashes that the decision to rise is made, not because we feel ready or strong, but because something within us refuses to stay down. To rise again requires us to embrace our humanity, the messy, imperfect parts of us that we'd rather hide. We often think courage is about charging forward with confidence, but more often it's about taking one trembling step at a time. It's about allowing ourselves to grieve the dreams that didn't come true, to feel the sting of betrayal or the ache of loneliness, without letting those feelings define our story. Rising again is a slow process of rebuilding, piece by piece, brick by brick. It's having the faith to gather even the smallest fragments of hope and begin again, trusting that with time, those pieces will form something beautiful. Beloved, finding strength in moments of weakness also means giving ourselves permission to ask for help. There is no shame in needing support or in admitting that we cannot do it alone. True courage is recognizing when our burdens are too heavy and reaching out a hand to those who can help carry them. In a world that praises independence and self-reliance, it takes immense bravery to say, I need you. But it is in this act of vulnerability that we discover the power of community, the kind of support that lifts us when we cannot lift ourselves. When we allow others into our struggle, we find that our weakness is not a failure, but an invitation to deeper connection and healing. Rising again also means rewriting the story we tell ourselves about failure. It's easy to see failure as a final verdict, proof that we are not enough. But what if instead we saw it as a lesson, as part of the refining process that shapes us into who we are meant to be? Every setback becomes an opportunity to learn, to adjust, to grow. When we change the narrative, failure loses its sting. We begin to see it not as the end of the road, but as a detour, one that, though painful, might lead us somewhere better than we had planned. This perspective shifts us from a mindset of defeat to one of resilience. Moreover, the courage to rise again involves forgiving ourselves for the mistakes we've made. Too often, we are our own harshest critics, replaying moments of regret on an endless loop. But holding on to guilt and shame keeps us anchored to the past, unable to move forward. True courage is choosing to extend grace to ourselves, to recognize that growth is a process and that no one gets it right all the time. Forgiveness allows us to break free from the chains of self-condemnation and step into the newness of each day with a heart that is willing to try again. Another aspect of rising again is cultivating gratitude, even in the midst of pain. Gratitude does not deny the reality of our struggles, it reframes them. It shifts our focus from what we have lost to what remains, from the emptiness of the broken pieces to the light that filters through them. When we make a habit of gratitude, we train our hearts to see goodness even in hardship, to find moments of grace in the wilderness. Gratitude becomes the fuel that keeps us moving forward, reminding us that there is still beauty to be found, even here, even now. Beloved, let us also remember that rising again is not about returning to who we used to be. There is no going back to the person we were before the storm hit. Rather, it is about becoming someone new, stronger, wiser, more compassionate. The broken places in us, once healed, become the most beautiful parts of our story. They are proof of our survival, testimonies of the battles we have fought, and the strength that has carried us through. Rising again is about embracing the transformation that pain has forged within us, stepping forward with scars that speak of hope and hearts that dare to love again. So let us be courageous, beloved. Let us gather the pieces of our shattered dreams and build anew, even if our hands tremble and our hearts ache. For the true miracle is not that we rise unscarred, but that we rise at all. That after everything, we still choose to believe, still choose to hope, still choose to love. This is the power of resilience. This is the courage to rise again. In a world that constantly demands perfection, choosing compassion, both for ourselves and for others, becomes a radical act of courage. We are conditioned to believe that if we can just get everything right, if we can be flawless in our words, our actions, and even our emotions, then we will finally be worthy of love and acceptance. But this pursuit of perfection is a trap that leaves us exhausted and empty, never quite enough. Compassion, on the other hand, whispers a different truth, that we are worthy, even in our imperfection, even in our mess. It invites us to lay down the heavy burden of perfectionism and embrace ourselves, scars and all. Choosing compassion starts with how we speak to ourselves in moments of failure and struggle. Too often, our inner dialogue is harsh and unforgiving, replaying mistakes on a loop and demanding more than we can give. But, beloved, if we would not speak to a dear friend that way, why do we speak to ourselves so cruelly? Self-compassion is about offering ourselves the same kindness we so readily extend to others. It's pausing in the midst of our self-criticism to say, I'm doing the best I can, and believing that is enough. This shift does not absolve us of accountability, but frees us from the paralyzing shame that keeps us from moving forward. Compassion also challenges the lie that our worth is tied to our productivity. We live in a culture that glorifies busyness, measuring our value by how much we can accomplish, how flawlessly we can juggle all the demands placed upon us. But beloved, our worth has never been defined by our ability to check off tasks or meet every expectation. Choosing compassion means allowing ourselves to rest without guilt, to embrace the slow and the simple, and to honor the need for stillness. It is recognizing that we are human beings, not human doings, that our value is inherent, not earned. Extending compassion to others, especially during difficult times, requires us to let go of judgment and embrace empathy. It's easy to criticize or distance ourselves from those whose actions we do not understand, but compassion asks us to lean in, to listen to the story behind the behavior, to remember that everyone is fighting battles we cannot see. When we choose compassion over perfection, we create space for others to show up authentically without fear of condemnation. This kind of grace transforms relationships, allowing them to be grounded not in performance, but in genuine connection and understanding. Moreover, compassion invites us to embrace the messiness of community. No relationship, be it family, friendship, or partnership, is without conflict or disappointment. Perfectionism tells us to withdraw when things get hard, to hold grudges, or demand flawless apologies. But compassion seeks reconciliation instead of revenge, understanding instead of accusation. It gives us the courage to have hard conversations with gentleness, to forgive even when it's undeserved, and to move forward with hearts that are both soft and strong. This doesn't mean tolerating abuse or toxic behavior, but rather choosing to respond to imperfection with love instead of retaliation. Another powerful aspect of choosing compassion over perfection is how it shapes our dreams and ambitions. Perfectionism paralyzes us with the fear of failure, convincing us that if we cannot do something flawlessly, we shouldn't do it at all. Compassion, however, invites us to take imperfect action, to write the messy first draft, to pursue the dream even if we stumble along the way. It teaches us that growth is a process, one that requires patience and persistence far more than precision. When we offer ourselves grace in our pursuits, we find the freedom to try, to fail, and to try again without the weight of shame. Beloved, compassion also transforms how we handle our past. So many of us carry the weight of regrets, replaying moments we wish we could change, words we wish we could unsay. Perfectionism chains us to these memories, insisting that until we make amends for every misstep, we cannot move forward. But compassion calls us to release ourselves from this prison of self-condemnation. It invites us to learn from our past without being defined by it, to believe that we are more than the worst thing we've ever done. In this way, compassion becomes a form of liberation, freeing us to embrace both who we were and who we are becoming. Beloved, choosing compassion over perfection is not a one-time decision, but a daily practice. It's catching ourselves in moments of self-judgment and choosing kindness instead. It's offering grace to the colleague who falls short, to the friend who lets us down, to the stranger who acts out of their own pain. It's remembering that we are all in this human experience together, flawed, beautiful, and doing the best we can. When we choose compassion, we become a source of light in a world that desperately needs it. We discover that perfection was never the goal. Love was. And love, true love, has always been rooted in grace.